Welcome back, people, to another show with the Four Elements United. Today, I am your host. I am Water.
I'm Win.
I'm fire.
I'm Earth.
And today, we have a great show for you today. This show for me has come up because there's a few different times that this has come up in our past shows. What are we on, like episode 10, 11 now, guys? What episode are we today? Win, you probably know.
This is
Somebody
10.
break it to him.
10? What?
So
What? What? What are we
go,
breaking?
go ahead, Fire. I can't do it.
All right, so water. You were on some pretty intensive medication last week because you were sick, and that sickness may have carried over throughout the correspondence throughout the week because we actually had a debrief call, and in that call we talked about Earth doing a part 2 of his show from last week because he didn't get through the spiritual components of his deal. So that's why we're laughing.
So is that what we're doing today? So hey, hold on. Now this is even funnier. Right? Because I'm getting over a cold. So we sit in the pre-show for like an hour almost. No one even mentioned this at all to say, hey, this is what we're doing or whatnot. But yeah, so let me turn it over to the true host this way. Let me turn it over to this guy over here, Earth.
I thought you want to call the debrief. You said you even said, go ahead, dude, do your thing.
Nah, dude, I've been sick. Like, so
right, I got you.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So hey, sorry, internet, for wasting 2 minutes of your life. All right, Earth.
I was wondering why you were looking at your notes and anxious about that.
Right. Because okay. So let's get this straight. So I literally said, let me pull up my notes, right? Like literally right before we went live, and then they're all over here laughing as if like I knew what was going on. Obviously, I was in the dark. But roll it, bro. Like this. So this shows you all like how communication is really the show that we need to be doing, because obviously there was a big breakdown in communication somewhere. But let's get it rolling, man, because we got tons of people live.
Somewhere.
Say what?
So three or four people.
Somewhere between his two ears.
Oh man.
Oh, nice.
Oh man, this is hilarious. But you gotta love it. It's just what it is.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna be on our bloopers.
Oh my goodness. And when he said, "Oh, let me get my notes together," I was like, "Dang, he did some research on."
Yeah, he gonna get deep on us.
Okay.
Intergalactic.
Hey, never make assumptions. It's one of the 4 agreements. Never make
assumptions.
assumptions.
Oh man, that was funny. Oh my goodness, that was funny. Cool. All right, so let's rewind real quick. So tonight we are going to continue the conversation from last week. Are you your trauma? There's some aspects of trauma that we did not get an opportunity to really dive deep into and tackle those things. And so last week's conversation was hot. I enjoyed the conversation. Obviously, from the feedback, you guys enjoyed the conversation. And when we announced that we were going to do it over, you guys were like, someone was like, "Oh, you're great. This needs to be a continuation." So cool. So this is where we are. Trauma. Are you your trauma? Water, have you put your notes to the side? You done that already?
I'm still reading them right now. Like this trauma conversation is dead to me. Dead to me.
Oh man, this is funny.
Yeah, you're gonna get all Yoda on us tonight.
Hey, you can tell he was ready. Could y'all tell he was ready?
He was ready, man. He was even on time ish.
Hey, and dressed. How about that?
He still got his towel on below his waist. He got a towel on and a polo t-shirt.
Wow. We're spending 5 minutes for this, really. Like I have all my people watching this, and you guys are really doing this. Wait till I get in a roasting mode. It's gonna be like the water. Hey, as Bruce Lee says, water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend. So water will crash eventually. But let's go. Let's roll.
All right, cool. So we dove into trauma last week. We really talked about some of the psychological aspects of trauma, and we really dove deep into that. And we spent a long time on talking about trauma from childhood, especially around discipline. So we talked about those things, and we really had a very, 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 very fruitful, very exciting conversation last week. So now this is an aspect of trauma that we don't talk about. We don't go down this road. And I think we don't go down this road because many of us don't think about trauma from a spiritual aspect. And so there's a couple of different things I'm going to talk about tonight in regards to trauma from a spiritual aspect. As I talked about briefly last week, trauma from a spiritual aspect. Got a DJ in the house. Sound like it's somebody on those turntables, ones and twos. But anyway, trauma. A lot of times we don't think about how trauma impacts our soul. We think about how it impacts us mentally and sometimes the physical aspect of the trauma, but we don't really talk about, or it's not a common conversation for us to think about or even to talk about it from the perspective of how it impacts us spiritually. So one of the ways it impacts us spiritually is it impacts our souls, period. And our souls are the things that are damaged and that are left hanging, not repaired. And that's why we'll go through life and we have to really learn how to cope with the trauma for the most part. And we do an excellent job of it. We do a phenomenal job, most of us, of coping with trauma. But we don't do a good job of coping with trauma from a spiritual perspective because as I stated earlier, the thing that is damaged is your soul. And when your soul is damaged, like that's the core, that's the essence, that's actually who you are. So that means that you're damaged. It means that you walk through life not fully being repaired. You walk through life coping with life. That's why sometimes, you'll find people when they're a lot older, all these things start coming up, even though they live their lives for however long, being very strong and dealing with the things that life has dealt them in regards to it being traumatic. And as we get older, people get into their 60s and 70s and 80s, you'll notice the conversation begins to change. You'll notice that those things that we were able to cope with throughout life, we're no longer able to cope with them in the same way because it's time for those things to be healed. And many times we don't get our souls healed at all, period. And so things that trauma, I'm talking about a couple of things in regards to trauma. Well, let me back up. Let me stop, time out. So what do you guys think about what I've said up to this point? I was about to go deep.
Yeah, I'll chime in. So it's funny how you said that there are people who never heal. And what's interesting is that we all know those people. A lot of us know those people when we look in the mirror. And when you said that there are people 50, 60, 70, 80, it's fascinating to think about some of the traumas that we take through our lives and that we just continue to carry them as opposed to allowing them to dissipate, to go do some work on it. I mean, you can choose whatever way you want to work through it. Some people, they work through it on their own. Some people work through it through church. Some people get a spiritual teacher. Some people go to counseling. There's all kinds of ways. You can get a self-help book, videos, online course, whatever. However, I think that one of the scariest things is to do the work because you have to actually go look at that trauma. So that's what I was hearing when you initially brought that up. What about you guys, Fire and Win?
So I'll jump in there. So I think about how we cleanse our bodies. I think about how we cleanse a detox, via detox, sweat, etc. I think about how we cleanse and purify our minds through meditation and things of that nature. But I hadn't to this conversation really given much consideration to the impact of traumas to the soul, and not just the mind, the will, and the emotions, the character, but that spiritual part of the soul, that everlasting life, that life force that continues after the body dies. Bro, I hope you have some research done in terms of how we actually deal with and get complete with that, because I'm thinking of all the work that we've done together, all the work that we've done individually, and how I've shaken the traumas off of me, how I've dealt with them intellectually, academically, how I deal with them, and how I deal with stress in the body by getting it out, working out, and things that's getting a good sweat and things of that nature. But at the soul level, like our spiritual DNA, I don't even know if I scratched the surface, bro, to be honest.
Yeah, I think trauma has various levels for various people, right? Um, and for certain, there is a karmic essence to certain traumas that, from an energetic perspective, sticks, particularly for quite some time. And for some people that don't properly work through it, it sticks with them for their lifetime, or a significant part of their lifetime. So this is going to be a great conversation because, there is certainly methodologies to effectively deal with that. And various cultures approach it differently. So I can't wait to hear what Earth has to say.
Cool. So some traumas are literally, from a spiritual perspective, passed down from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, because it has not been dealt with. It's not been resolved at all. And so that is why you will find sometimes in families that there are events that happen, and it will say, oh, this is a generational curse. But the reality is, it is not a generational curse. So I'm gonna give you an example, and I'm gonna get to the resolution in a little bit. Say, for example, someone experienced like sexual trauma as a child, right? And you go through life not having that being resolved. Then you have children, and those children experience the same thing. It may look different, but basically it's sexual abuse at the end of the day, right? Then they have children and they experience the same thing, and it goes unresolved. That is because, from a spiritual perspective, that trauma was never dealt with. And so many of you know I practice within an African tradition. Okay. And so I'm going to speak to you from that perspective and what happens when we experience trauma and it goes undealt with. Okay. So what happens in that scenario is that when someone is traumatized, what happens to you is that there are, along with, of course, your soul is traumatized, your mind is traumatized, and for many people, physically, there's trauma as well. What goes along with that is the moment you experience trauma, and we'll say, for example, sexual trauma, you actually, the emotions that you emit, you actually attract these, we call them unfavorable, or some people may say negative energies, and they come and they leach themselves to you. And as long as you can stay within a traumatic state, someone can be functioning or functional in life and still be in a traumatic state, and you may not know. But as long as that trauma is still there, those energies feed, especially when you go into a state where you're depressed or you get upset or something which causes you to sort of reenact whatever you felt during that trauma. Okay? Those energies feed, and they do things to promote you to express those emotions, because that's how they feed. Now, you go off and you have children. Guess what some of those energies do? They jump from you to your children. And when that happens, they will drive the life of your children to put them in positions where they can experience trauma. And then they have children. So those energies jump on those children. And it just goes from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. That's why you will have families. And some of you experience this. And some of you know people who the grandmother was sexually assaulted. The mother was, or the father, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren. It just keeps going. And what needs to happen is from a traditional perspective, there are specific rituals that are performed to actually cleanse you. But the mother, if she's living, or the father, they need to be cleansed first, then the children, and so on and so forth. There's even a specific order in which things need to happen. And then once that happens, then you'll notice that in future generations, you will not see that pattern exist. It has to be cut, literally. And if we do not cut it, it will continue. And then I don't care how much you pray, it ain't gonna go away. And I am 1,000% for prayer. I pray. I don't care how much therapy you go to, it is not going to go away. Because in order to deal with something spiritual, you have to use something spiritual. It's like you fight fire with fire. And that is how you cleanse that out of your bloodline. There are many of us who have trauma in our bloodlines, and it just keeps hopping from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, and just shows up differently. A lot of our mental illness, and for those who don't know, I'm a diviner also, so I sit with people, I divine for them. Those who don't know who a diviner is similar to someone who does readings, but they're different, they're not the same, okay? And many times when I look down people's bloodlines from today back as far as I can see, I literally see the trauma, and I pinpoint this is where it started. And it's hopping from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. Some of that trauma only impacts men. Some of the trauma only impacts women. Some of it impacts both. It all depends. But nevertheless, the root of it was some trauma. And it's literally interwoven into your bloodline. and you cannot see it. And you will think that your family is cursed. Nope, that's not what it is. It is unresolved trauma. So I'm gonna stick a pin right there for a quick second and see what and check in with the elements. What y'all got?
I got some questions. So given what you just said, my first thought goes back to the legacy of slavery. So given what you said, we're all impacted adversely in that manner. And until we actually do what you just suggested, we're SOL.
For the most part. And it shows up how it shows up. But you have to get, so I want to be clear about trauma. Trauma does not discriminate. So you take slavery, right? And just because someone was a slave owner, it doesn't mean that everyone in their family condoned the behavior, nor could be in a position where they could watch someone be brutalized or watch someone be killed. So you have some of those people who experience trauma as well.
Right. So from what I hear, the Americas and the islands, are all adversely impacted by this experience. And
Go ahead.
And the continent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until it's effectively dealt with, it's not going to be a great situation.
No.
Well, what's interesting about this is that we talk about reparations, and reparations is considered, monetary or land. But what really ought to happen with respect to reparations is that healing. That's number one. Number two, what's also interesting is that, given your African perspective, I often hear many Africans say that, oh, you guys should just get over it. So it's interesting that you have that perspective and many of them don't. So I'll pause right there and let you respond.
Well, so I'm going to say this. There's a distinction. I want to draw a very clear line in the sand. There's a distinction between a continental African who is traditional and a continental African who's colonized. There's a distinction. I promise you, the continental Africans who've had that conversation with you, and I have nothing against what anybody practices at all. I don't. I promise you they practice within a Judeo-Christian based religion. I promise you. Because if you understand tradition, if you understand spirituality, if you understand spirit, it is impossible for something like that to leave your lips. Impossible. Because you don't understand the impact. And if someone says that to you, you should quote an African proverb to them, which I've seen this within. I've looked at all 3,000 ethnic groups on the continent. So I haven't done that. But the ones I've seen this a similar, if not the same, saying. I'll paraphrase it. Basically, what you do today, which means what happens to you today, how you respond to today, impacts the next 7 generations. Period. It's an African proverb. I've seen it all over the place. So it is impossible for them to be traditional. Those are people who have abandoned their tradition. Period. From a spiritual perspective. I'm not saying they may have a traditional wedding or blah, 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 all that stuff. That's not the full embodiment of tradition. It's not. Not in the least. Nope. Not in the least.
Understood. So how do we approach a mass reconciliation, a mass atonement, a mass healing?
Or you want to go down that road?
We have to.
First, this is what we have to do first. The very first thing you must do is you must focus on what is at the root of our very existence. We have to begin to reconnect with our ancestors from a traditional perspective. And what I mean by that is pulling them to you, not just acknowledging their existence. That's okay. And I stress it is okay. But being able to have a relationship with them, being able to allow yourself to be guided, that's different than lighting 2 or 3 candles, leaving out a plate or whatever you leave out, and saying thank you for whatever. They're not the same at all. That is at the root. If you really want to go, we don't nearly have enough time to really dive into like how to do this on a massive level, but that's at the core of it. That's at the root. And I'll just leave it right there, because I could talk about the other steps, but the other steps don't matter if step 1 is missing, where you can't even acknowledge your ancestors. You can't even do that. You can't even acknowledge the fact that you have ancestors who never stepped foot on wherever you live. And you think your ancestors are just the people who you know. Nah. So I won't even go any further. That's at the foundation. Really, 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 really. That's good. Until we are willing to do that, we got a long way to go. And people will actually, come in and do the work, get the work done, whatever. But on a massive scale, it's not going to happen because I'll leave it at that. All right. What else y'all got? You muted, Fire.
I was just telling my mother-in-law, who doesn't have an inside voice, if she can find it, it would be really helpful to the podcast if she could find her inside voice. She's so loud. She doesn't have an inside voice. I swear to goodness. So, of course, Win would swing for the fences. You know what I mean? Like, when does like mass reconciliation? How do we get it done? Because that's what Win does. I had another thought. My thought was this.
And
go ahead. I'm sorry. Like, how do we get this multi-million-dollar podcast contract tomorrow? Like, how do we do that? But here
10 million subscribers.
10 million subscribers. Earth, my thought was this. Dang. My bad. Water, dang. I have what I'm hearing is that we and me, we're dealing with or not dealing with, not even cognizant and mindful of generational traumas that we inherited through our bloodline, our DNA. But then we also have traumas that we experience in this lifetime that are like, traumas that happen or that occurred to me that didn't come from back there. So I just want to make a distinction. So we are both occurring, or is everything a ripple effect of either my generational traumas and or someone else's generational traumas, right? Because if I'm suffering at the hand of somebody who's causing the trauma, is that the expression of a trauma or generational trauma that they haven't dealt with?
Yeah, it could be like you can create, I like the word ripple. You can create a new ripple in your lifetime. It doesn't have to be something that happened 100 years ago, 500 years ago. It doesn't have to be that at all. It doesn't have to be. You can create new ripples today.
Got you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I see.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot to deal with and a lot to unpack. So I am like winning in the sense that I want to get into solution mode, because I'm like, you've been doing the artwork for so long. We like, all right, elementals. We laugh and we talk about the chief slaying chickens and playing with goat bones and all these kinds of things. And it's funny, but it's not a joke. Like he's doing real work. I mean, just the other day we were on our debrief call. He had some, I don't know what you were slaying out back, bro, but you had something going on. And now I'm like, man, and you never forced any of this stuff on us for all these years. You've been deep into the African tradition. I mean, you told us about it, but I feel like I got some catching up to do.
Yeah. So, what's your question?
I don't think he had a question.
So that was a comment, but the question is, take the mass reconciliation out of it. All right.
Right.
Like you said, we don't have any consciousness of who our ancestors are before those who touched the shores of the United States. If we can go back that far, some of us can't go back 3 generations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let alone beyond that. So in that being the majority of our reality, I think 2023 and me might help you out. But in the absence of that, what do we do?
Well, so in the absence of that, right? You may not. I'll say this: you may not know your ancestors, but they're always with you, and they know you. That's the distinction there. And from a solution perspective, what time is it?
You got time, Chief. You got time, Chief.
Well, yeah, see, when I give, like when I speak, I like to be very comprehensive, and to be comprehensive on what this is within the next 30 minutes, it's not possible, because I'll leave something out, because it's not enough time to get on that granular level that we need to get on. And
So
I would say this is the solution. And I'll say this, even if you are a Christian, because Christians actually practiced and they acknowledged ancestors up until I think they was 532 AD, sometime around in there. And then it was totally removed from the church, from the churches, completely wiped out. So I'll say that. What I would say to start is to go, and you can say, even if you're just doing your regular prayers, or you can go to your ancestors and you can ask for the traumas which plague your family to be revealed to you. And you can say that you want to be directed in a direction which will lead you to the solution. And in saying that, you must also say that you want your mind to be open so that you can recognize it, you can see that you can receive the solution. Because sometimes the solution can be right at your feet and you will literally step over it and keep going. Because what the mind does is it automatically creates a solution, what it should look like. It creates that fantasy. And we will look for that and the solution to be right there at our feet. And we'll continue to step over it. So I would say start there. That is a perfect place to start. And then be patient along the way, because it will be revealed to you. You will see it. Allow yourself to be directed. Even sometimes if it's a direction in which you're like, oh, hold up, time out, wait a minute. That is the direction. No one says that a path has to look a certain way. A path will look however it looks in order for you to get what you need, period. That is how it works. So I would start there and allow yourself to be guided, allow yourself to be led, allow yourself to get out of your stubbornness, not get out of your way. You have to know what the thing is that's in your way. And for many of us, it's our stubbornness. For many of us, it's our unwillingness to listen. For many of us, it is, I know it all already. That's what's in your way. And so we have to be clear about what is in our way. And you can even add within that prayer, whatever's in your way, reveal it to you. You can add that and you'll see that it'll come. You'll see it. It'll be right there for you to see. That's where you start. And you need patience, because especially when you're doing spiritual work, it is a marathon. I promise you, it is not a sprint at all. It is not a sprint. So I hope that answered your question, Fire. I did my best to really pack it.
It was well done. You gave me some action items. You know, I'm always looking for some deliverables, man, and I got it, and I got good notes, so I appreciate it.
Cool. Now, I want to touch on. So I want to just go back a little bit and talk about like trauma. I'm gonna get out of the generational trauma just for a quick moment, and I want to talk about your lived experience of, for example, a new trauma, because you talked about, what if it's something that you experienced in your life, and I said, okay, you can create a new ripple. Even when those things happen, if you're present enough in those moments, you can actually get it dealt with. But it really takes something to be willing to deal with it. Because depending upon how long you have been dealing with whatever that trauma is, believe it or not, you've done this. You've hooked yourself into it. And because you're hooked into it spiritually, because it becomes, we allow it to become a part of our lives. And a lot of times when we're hooked into something, we'll say that we're ready to move past it, but we're really not ready to move past it, because it's a part of our existence and it becomes our normal. And many of us don't want to live life abnormally. And normal is a case by case, person by person thing. There's no like this global normalcy that doesn't exist. And so what becomes normal to you is what you're used to, what you've adapted to. That becomes your normal. And we have to be aware that we don't fall into the trick or allow ourselves to remain hooked to the trauma. Or we'll never get to a point where we're ready to let it go. Not even spiritually, because we won't go do the spiritual work to let it go. And the rituals for trauma, they're simple. And I'm gonna just simplify it. All you're gonna do, an elder does a ritual for you, gives you some herbs, you bathe in the herbs, there's some prayers you say, you may eat some black medicine. That does it. It's really that simple. It is easy. And it would only take 7 days. That's it. To cleanse your soul. 7 days. That's all it would take, is that. So what I want everyone to do is to really think about like trauma from a spiritual perspective, trauma from a soul perspective, and look at how you have possibly said to yourself, I have actually conquered this thing, whatever this thing is. And think about whether or not you have quote unquote conquered it in the physical realm and still have it hanging around in the spiritual realm. Because sometimes that can show up as nightmares. It can show up as that. Sometimes it can show up as, man, I can't sleep. I haven't slept peacefully in 15 years. We literally have people who have not had a good night's rest in 15 years. How do I know? I've dealt with them. But if you ask them about their trauma, oh, I'm past that. I've gone to therapy. I've done this. I've done the work. But they can't sleep because their soul is restless. That's why they can't sleep. So I really want you all to think about it from that perspective. What have you not dealt with? A trauma that you have not dealt with, but look at it from a spiritual perspective. All you have to do is think about it from a spiritual perspective and you will see it. Like usually it's right there, literally. It's there. So I'm gonna stick a pin right there real quick and see what the elements have to say. Silence.
Water, please share your thoughts, bro.
Yeah, that's a lot to digest. That's a lot to digest. What are you hearing? Fire and wind. What are you guys hearing?
I'm looking. I'm actually looking for a trauma that that I believe that I dealt with in the physical or the mental, but I haven't in the spiritual. I gotta keep looking. And one of the reasons why, at least while I'm looking and I'm observing myself look, is that I'm seeing that because I get so naked in environments in opportunities to get free or to cleanse, I don't have a lot there. So I'm gonna have to look. I'm gonna have to look. I mean, I've shared some pretty dark stuff in front of a lot of people, and so I didn't hold anything back when we did our work. Like I let all the embarrassment and the judgment go, and I just got in there. That's what I do. So I really don't. I'm not hiding from myself. So I gotta look more deeply to find what Earth is pointing to. So that's my observation of myself. I think if I was more guarded in my sharing and in my being transparent, I would have more stuff to unpack. But why don't we grab Kenyatta? Why don't we grab Yada's comment and then invite the elementals to try on the same inquiry, which is a trauma that you believe that you dealt with, but when you look at it from a spiritual perspective, that thing is still there.
Yeah, it can still be there because I'll say this. For me, by the time I started doing traditional work, right? I thought I was like you. I was like, okay, I've dealt with this thing. I talk about some really dark things that happened, blah blah blah. And then as I started to go down the rabbit hole, the spiritual aspect started to pop up. Oof. Just unexpected. I wasn't looking for it. Just it wasn't there for me to look.
Right.
But a whole other aspect I had not considered popped up. And that's when I had a conversation with one of my elders, and he said, it is the soul that remains real.
Let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
When you say you thought you dealt with it, was it your reaction or your response to your trigger response to these traumas? Did they continue to occur?
I had nothing going on at all. Like you and I went through the same program. I had nothing going on with any of it at all. Zero. But that was only here in the physical realm.
Yeah.
So my mind was free.
Right.
But I argue my soul was not in that aspect. Because my soul still carried it. Because it just remained unaddressed. That's all. That is it.
Yeah.
So what was Kenyatta's question, comment?
Kenyatta from Facebook said, Earth, as you're speaking this, I'm thinking about asking the ancestors to reveal the generational curses in clarity. I got overwhelmed because I know they'll reveal it to me, but I'm not sure if I'm ready for it. That's real.
Oh, this is beautiful. So this is what you do. You request that it is revealed to you. You want it to be revealed to you like expeditiously, but in a way that does not overwhelm you. You want to be able to handle it. Don't tell them to spoon feed it to you. Don't do that one. You say, give it to you or reveal it to you in a way that does not overwhelm you, a way that does not send you into a place where you should not be, in a way that has you to run or to ignore it. So you don't want it to be revealed to you in that way. And so I would add that to the prayer to address that. That's what I would do.
Yeah. And we have another one from Moya. If you want to take this one too. Fire, you want to read this one off too?
Yeah. So the question from Moya on YouTube is to Earth. How do we deal with the ongoing repetitive trauma?
Wow, this is really good. This is excellent. Generally, when you experience ongoing repetitive trauma, remember earlier I spoke about those unfavorable energies, or you say negative energies that will attach themselves to you. That is 9 times out of 10, that's what you're dealing with. Because those energies they literally want you to express the trauma emotionally because they feed off of that. That's how they feed. So they want you to actually experience that, or they'll push you in a direction where you can repetitively experience it. And so it may occur like Groundhog's Day or something like that. That's how it may occur. But it's those energies that are there, and there are certain rituals that can be done to actually remedy that. Actually, that's the things that can be done for that. So yeah. Okay. What else we got?
We
So
have another. Get another. Fire.
do you? So this is from Kenya, from Cali. Kenya, part of Cat. Type in your. I mean, don't put your zip code in there, but put your city in there. I'm in Calabasas, Kenya, from Cali. I'm also in Cali. Do you feel a physical difference when you address the trauma in your soul?
Absolutely, yes. Yes, you do. And whatever that experience is for you, it's going to be different for each person, because it could be the difference could be what someone's soul is being traumatized by, or how much trauma is sitting there. But there is a difference. Definitely, there's definitely a difference that exists. All right.
And this one isn't really a question, but we'll just pop this one up as a comment.
So what I heard is where pain shows up is the pointer to your trauma. James from YouTube asking a clarifying question, or really a clarifying comment. So where pain shows up is an indicator or a pointer to your trauma.
I would say that's true, but I don't know if that would be true in every instance at all. Because what we have to understand is that there's certain places in our bodies where we hold our emotions. And so we will store trauma there. We may store upsets there, things that are not even trauma, just upsets. Anything that occurs in life that's unfavorable, we store it in that place. So it could be just where you're storing the trauma, and it may show up there. So I would say not necessarily. So that would be my response to that one.
That's understandable. And what do you have to say about this one? Grab T Root's comment, water the rabbit hole comment. So T Root says,
Hold on one second.
yeah.
Oh, got it.
So T Root says the rabbit hole doesn't end; it just gets deeper. I'll say the deeper you go, the more free you feel. Has that been your experience, Eric?
Yeah, absolutely. The rabbit hole is literally never ending. And we have to understand, one thing we have to understand about ourselves is that we have literally been trained to accept trauma as something that's normal, accept trauma as something that should happen, accept pain and suffering as something that should happen. We should experience this. It is a good thing that you experience this. You learn something from this. We've been trained that way. So we've been trained not to go down a rabbit hole, because there's freedom down the rabbit hole. There's minimal to no trauma down the rabbit hole. There's resolution. I'm going to say minimal to none. There's resolution to trauma down the rabbit hole. So yeah, the deeper you go down the rabbit hole, the freer you are. But we've been trained to actually be, to embody, to walk as trauma, to glorify trauma. And I argue that there's nothing glorious about trauma. Absolutely, positively nothing. So to answer a question, yeah. I mean, it's not the question, but to comment on her statement, yeah, it's very freeing. And that's why I stated earlier, like part of the hook that's there is we've been taught to be hooked. It's training. It's all within our educational systems. It's all within where pain and suffering is within our educational systems. It's all within our governmental systems, all within our religious systems. To exist within pain and suffering is glorious. Nah. Mm-mm. Nope. I don't find glory in pain and suffering. That's just me. I just don't at all.
It's interesting that we're having this conversation because the Matrix Resurrection drops tomorrow. And I agree with you, Earth. You know, there's nothing glorious about pain. I mean, we should all be running towards healing, right? Running towards clarity, running towards wisdom and understanding, running towards peace. And nowhere on the internet, on social media, or very few places will you get 4 Black men having a conversation like this. So part of that healing process is smashing that subscribe button, hitting that notification bell, liking, commenting, and sharing.
I shaded that.
Taking a page
And let me just say this is that, you know, what Earth has been alluding to and what our intent of this program is effectively is a return to self. Our community is such in an uproar and upside down. And our intent is to healthily impact the people around us through conversations of substance, just like this. And the pathway to our healing, to our progress, is a return to self, getting back to who we really are. Everybody on the planet knows that life emanated from the continent of Africa. All religions, all philosophies, all spiritual matters, all mathematics, all science emanated from Africa. So if you want the answer to whatever you're dealing with, the answer is simple. Return to self. And I'll leave it right there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, wow, this hour went by quick. You know, I want to comment on the return to self, and you are perfectly on point. It is a return to self. It is the return to our nature. It is being who you were born into this world as. Like that is self. You were born as something or someone, and returning to that. And believe it or not, we spend our adulthood fighting, clawing, in some instances killing. Can we say that word? 86ing, we'll say that one. Cheating, lying, in an attempt to return to that self or to return to our nature. That is why the self-help industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, because people are fighting to return to self. And I always say, if the self-help industry, and I am not anti-self-help in the least, to be clear about that.
Yeah, because I was going to say, you're going to kill us if you're, you know, shooting yourself in the foot, bro.
I am not anti-self-help in the least. However, everyone's self-help journey is their own journey. I would not write a self-help book based upon my journey, because that is my journey. And that's why many times people will go out and attempt to emulate someone else's journey because this person says this is how you reach enlightenment. But this is how that person reached enlightenment. Period. And it could be the same for someone else. However, if the self-help industry, it's been around long enough, I think for at least 40, 50 years at the minimum, it should have gone out of business by now. If the self-help industry was actually that viable. My objective in life for people is for people to return to their power, for people to not have to go out and seek and spend thousands upon thousands of dollars for some type of self-help, because it's so ingrained in our cultures, in our communities. Anyone who's ever been in a traditional community, you will see why there's no need for self-help anything. Everything is self-contained there. Everything you deal with life, it can be handled there. You have small children who can tell you how to handle things that you may go to see a psychologist about, because it's ingrained in the culture itself. In the same way we have things ingrained within our culture. But within traditional cultures, you don't see the things you don't see there because they're ingrained in the culture. And that's where I want us to be. So there's no need for that. It's something that you're literally born into. And so it becomes a part of you from the time you take your first breath. It is you. It is so wrapped in your DNA. When you come, it's there. And we can alter all of that. Someone mentioned epigenetics earlier. I saw that in one of the comments. To where it's literally passed down from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next. So you don't need those things. It's already there. If there's issues, there's already people in place who can address the issues. You don't have to go read a book. I'm not anti, I love to read. I'm not anti any of that. We're just not there yet at all. We're just not. And we're not far from that place. It may seem like we are, but we're really not far from just making a slight adjustment, because people want it. If people didn't want it, there would not be a self-help industry, a viable self-help industry. That's why I say we're close. There's a viable industry there. We just need to make some minor adjustments there. But anyway, I can talk about this all night. I just noticed the time. It is at an hour and 3 minutes to wrap it up. So Elements, what you got as the closing words tonight?
When really hit it out the park with the return to self. So the only thing I would add to that or present that was really present and prominent for me throughout this discussion is this line that you said that's got me over here in a trance. All right. And so the line was, what you do or say today impacts the next 7 generations. I'm going to just represent the elementals to that. And if there are any elementals out there who are mothers and fathers, I am a father of 4. I am a husband. That's got me thinking. That's got me thinking on a whole different level, bro. Because it's not like what I do and say today impacts the moment. Yeah, it may impact the moment. It may impact the environment. It may impact the people in the environment. But thinking about my kids and my kids' kids and their kids' and so on and so forth. Good Lord, talk about responsibility. So that's my takeaway, and what I'm giving back to you all, just representing you to that line is it's serious.
Yeah, it is. And I like, you know, to piggyback off of Wynn's comment about returning back to self, as Fire had mentioned, I think that one of the I guess, to bring it full circle for this conversation, the traumas began to pile up and pile up and pile up and pile up until eventually it's almost if you were carrying something, until eventually you're carrying so much stuff that you have no room for anything else. And so I like, you know, Wynn's comment to bring it full circle is the return to self, is just returning to that person who you were before the traumas were there. I'll leave it there. Wynn, pass it off to you, bro.
Yeah, our continual pain and suffering stems from not being willing to face this properly head on and acknowledge the truth. It also stems from us not necessarily knowing the proper pathway to effectively deal with these issues. And so what the four elements united provides and will continue to provide is a granular pathway to help everybody out, including ourselves. But at the end of the day, unless you acknowledge the issues and acknowledge that some other form of being, somebody else's way of being, this Western culture is not for you, you will continually be in pain and suffering and be traumatized. So again, all this is about is return to self. Be yourself. Yourself is more than what you even know about. We're powerful people tremendously. And if you just do a little study, just a little bit every day, all of our lives would be so much better. Make it a habit. And I'll pause right there. Next week, Water, has his own show that he prepared for. So he should be very well prepared next week.
Actually, I might not be. How about that? I may just be present in the moment.
And that's a beautiful thing, because water flows this way and that way, but it always flows. And it always nourishes. It always replenishes. The radiant one.
Yeah. This guy's feeling it, right? Like, look at this guy. Wynn is on his game today, man. Earth, did you want to close out the show, man, or did you have any closing comments that you wanted to bring?
Yeah, just really quick, just it's just so important for all of us to be free. And we literally strive, we literally fight for freedom. That's all that we are fighting for, is to be free. And so I hope you got tonight that one of the steps to like the ultimate freedom is for your soul to be free. And one of the things that binds our souls are our traumas. have us bound spiritually. And I just want everybody to take a step. There are many ways. So what I mentioned is not the only way to do something. I'm clear about that. But you will not get there by yourself. Life doesn't happen in a vacuum. By no stretch of the imagination does it happen there. Life happens with others. And so that is why we're here. To maybe guide you or point you in a direction. But I really want everyone to ask. Because we don't get what we need if we don't ask. And be open for assistance in getting to where your soul can be free. And I don't want anyone to walk around saying, I got it. We do that way too much. I'm good. We say that way too much. And we're not. And so I want everyone just to be able to ask. Those of you who actually understand, have a comprehension of your ancestors, ask your ancestors to help you, to help reveal to you your traumas. Those of you who are Christian, pray for that. And however you pray for that, even if you are Muslim, I don't care what you are, however you pray for that. Because I didn't get where I am today until I prayed. I said it was a specific prayer. I was 20, whatever. And I said, I was praying. And I said, God, show me the truth. I knew something was wrong, off. And I said, I wanted the truth to be revealed to me. Show me truth. And that is how people ask, how do I end up from where I was to being a traditionalist? That is how I ended up there, because I just asked for truth. That's it. And so you do that and you'll see. Because life is easy. I promise you, life is not difficult at all. Life is actually very easy. It is us. And I argue that in many instances, it is us in our quest. And I love the way Wynn phrased that, for self, in our quest for freedom, which complicate life. And so I just want everyone just to ask. That's how simple life is. Ask. And with that, I'll turn it over to Water to set up next week's show. What you got?
Bro, I already did this. I did this last week. You guys are straight clowning. Hey, go. As a matter of fact, you go watch the last episode. I already did this. So we're about to go now. We're over time. We're about to go. And next week I will host. I think we'll be on for Wednesday. Yep, it is Wednesday the 29th. Our regular normal time. The Power of Decision. Again, for those who watched last week, and maybe next week it'll be something different, and I'll get on and they'll tell me after we start. Maybe that's how it'll go. I don't know. But thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch you all next week. Next Wednesday, not Tuesday, at 8 p.m. Take care.
Peace.
Peace, everybody.